Seen it all, you can't all benefit too. Femme fatale, I can't fall in love with you. Seen it all, you can't all benefit too. Femme fatale, I can't fall in love with you. Yeah, whiskey in my head, Henny in a cupboard. If you want it, I'm just saying. You can have whatever, just don't ask me about a plan. Let's avoid the topic, benefit from being friends. We can be together.
For more than 30 years, we've published unique stories, insights, and case studies, from neural machine translation to racial bias and localization.
Visit multilingual.com/subscribe and start reading today.
Seen it all, you can't all benefit too. Femme fatale, I can't fall in love with you.
Bad follows you like a shadow, yeah. We gon' end up in the gallows, yeah. Give it deep, but you shallow, yeah. If you ride, then you ride, grab a saddle. Bad follows you like a shadow, yeah. We gon' end up in the gallows, yeah. Give it deep, but you shallow, yeah. If you ride, then you ride, grab a saddle.
1, 2, 3. When I saw my woman kiss another man, said I know, no baby, no, not again. Another loss of love, another broken heart. I ain't got no love alone, the blues again. Hey, hey, hear what I say, ain't got me no love. Well, it's happened 2 or 3 or 4 times before. You think it wouldn't even mess with a woman no more. But I love how it feels in those tender arms. I ain't got no love alone, the blues again. Hey, hey, hear what I say, ain't got me no love. I guess I go home alone again tonight. And I'll cry, cry till I feel alright. I get my mojo working once more. I got the ain't got no love alone the blues again. Hey, hey, hear what I say, ain't got me no love. Sometimes I like to be by myself, but I don't like to put my love on a shelf. But sometimes love hurts, it sure is fun. Like I ain't got no love alone the blues on the run. Hey, hey, hear what I say, ain't got me no love. Hey, hey, hear what I say, ain't got me no love. Hey, hey, hear what I say, I'm alone again.
For more than 30 years, we've published unique stories, insights, and case studies, from neural machine translation to racial bias and localization.
Visit multilingual.com/subscribe and start reading today.
Welcome everybody to today's multilingual summer series panel on identifying and entering new global markets. To give an overview of what we're covering today, so international expansion is an excellent way to widen your audience and grow your online revenue. However, not all markets offer the same opportunities for your brand. In this panel, we'll have a look at how to minimize the risk and maximize the reward of growing into new markets, from identifying opportunities to testing the water on a smaller budget. We'll also cover what brands need to consider when localizing their offering to ensure reach and resonate with their international audience. I'm Chris Attewell. I'm CEO of a company called Search Laboratory. We are a global digital marketing company with offices in the UK and the US. And we specialize in helping a mix of B2C and B2B companies grow their global revenue through their website and social media channels. And we've been doing that for about 15 years now. So hopefully that gives us the right kind of experience to lead a conversation on this topic. I'm also really pleased to be joined by two fantastic experts today in international digital marketing. So firstly, we have Nicola Winters, who's Head of International at Search Laboratory. And we also have Liam Higgins, who is International Growth Program Lead for UK and Ireland at Google. I'll hand over very briefly to Nicola and to Liam to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Like Chris said, I head up the international department at Search Laboratory, and basically what that means is that I directly manage a team of mother tongue digital practitioners, and we sort of execute growth campaigns across both paid and organic channels. And essentially this sort of topic, it's what we are really keen to look into with our clients every single day. So I'm really pleased to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Nicola. Over to you, Liam.
Thanks, Chris, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're based. As Chris said, my name's Liam Higgins, and I'm a consultant from Dublin in Ireland. So I've been at Google for the past 4 years or so, where I initially started working directly with businesses in the advertising space before making a move over to the agency side, where I got to start working with leading digital agencies such as Search Labs. And now I'm leading the International Growth Agency program at Google for the UK and Ireland, where essentially we aim to help partner with the leading digital agencies globally to provide more advanced and exciting solutions to be able to support them in enabling businesses to succeed internationally.
Fantastic. Thanks, Liam. So before we get started, you'll notice there's a messages tab on the right-hand side. Please do send in any questions that you have as we go along. We have some time at the end to answer those questions, so please don't be shy. If there's anything you'd like to ask, pop it in the messages and we'll get to it at the end. We are also being broadcast on social media, so across me see if I get this right, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube today. So should have a great audience. So to get into it then, and to set the scene a little bit to get started, for companies who may be at the beginning of their journey to international growth, what would you say are the main benefits of expanding into new global markets, and why should businesses consider this as part of their overall growth strategy? So I think if I go to Nicola first, maybe on that one.
Yeah, I think right at the beginning when you were explaining, the purpose of today's discussion, you touched upon two key things, and that is it's revenue and it's reaching, new and wider audiences. I'd also sort of like to touch upon something, and that is, selling internationally is hard work, and I think it's quite difficult for a lot of businesses to obtain the right sort of insights to identify which markets that are going to be, the most lucrative for your business. And, the last 12 to 18 months, however long we've been in this sort of global pandemic, has massively sort of changed the landscape. And so I think businesses should always have, international expansion on their radar and be ready to take advantage of, the opportunities that do surface, and also to just be more competitive. It is a, I don't want to say it's easier to sell internationally these days, but, we, particularly in retail, we're working with a lot of existing shopping platforms, and platforms with a machine behind it that can help businesses to just sort of take advantage of that and test the waters. So yeah, I would say making more money, reaching more people, and just being in general more competitive.
Okay, great stuff, Nicola. Yeah, that's a really good point about about technology. It's as Nicola said, it's not easy to expand into new markets, but the technology is there quite often out of the box in some of the newer e-commerce and CMS platforms out there that enables companies to get live and grow into these new markets pretty quickly. So I mean, over to you on this one, Liam. Nicola touched on the fact that it's been a bit of a funny time over the past 12 to 18 months in the market generally. Is now a good time to grow internationally?
I think, look, obviously it's a difficult question to answer, but I think now really is an excellent time to internationalize. I think it's something that we're actually seeing ourselves at Google in particular. We're actually seeing that our international revenue is growing at twice the rate of domestic for a lot of businesses, showing where I think the mindset has changed over the last, not just the last 18 months. I would say it's been going on a little bit longer than that, but it's crazy to see how much quicker it is growing. And I think obviously there are always going to be risks associated with making such a big business decision, such as internationalizing. But as we've come to realize over this past 20 months or so, due to COVID and due to Brexit, is that there's probably this growing need for businesses not only to grow their revenue and grow their sales and approach new customers, but it's this need to actually diversify their revenue and try and mitigate a little bit of the risk that has come from the likes of COVID, Brexit, particularly for UK retailers. And over that same time period, we've actually seen the cross-border trade has grown more than 30%. Right. And within that, retail e-commerce spending has reached about $4.2 trillion globally. So it's crazy to see that acceleration. And I think there have been a couple of trends, obviously, which are impacting that. I think firstly, we see globalization has become obviously a way to recover both economically for both businesses and for countries. We know that because of the quicker bounce back versus the 2008 recession, for example. There's been this big increased focus on resilience, on improving supply chains and bringing them closer to home. And that's actually causing cross-border purchases to intensify a little bit more. So we have that. And then I think we've probably all noticed between ourselves as well, is that the time that we're spending online by being in lockdown and being at home is higher than ever. So naturally, that's actually going to increase our exposure to and our exploration of new products, new brands. And we're seeing that more and more from customers, which is all then being helped by this digitalization or tech acceleration that's coming through. I think last year, e-commerce, it has, I think it was 10 years worth of growth in the first 3 months of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is incredible. So businesses and consumers alike are really adapting to shopping online. So as a result, it's reducing the number of borders that the internet has versus someone who's trying to set up a business in an international market as a brick and mortar store. Because of this increased digital reach, businesses are now much more capable of diversifying from their domestic markets, their usual revenue streams, and reaching customers around the world. So it's brilliant to see how much it is, and it is really a good time to take, I suppose, to look at that as an opportunity to jump on that growing wave.
Perfect. That's brilliant. That sounds really exciting. Some big numbers there in those stats. I mean, it's great to get those numbers directly from Google as well. I mean, you guys have a pretty good bird's eye view of a lot of stuff that goes on in the market. So that's really impactful. Thanks, Liam. So if we move on next to the question of, well, that was the first step in making the decision as to whether we should expand internationally. It goes without saying that the world's a pretty big place, lots of countries and markets to consider. Typically, when we speak to clients and prospective clients, most companies don't have unlimited budgets and resources. So there's always a process of working out where we focus our efforts. How do we go about deciding where to focus our time and resources when looking to expand internationally, given that there are so many opportunities out there to go into new markets and sell products?
Well, I think to take it from my side of things, obviously looking at it from a Google perspective, there's so many tools that we have available through the likes of Google Analytics and your own Google Ads data, if you are running marketing with Google, that allow you to essentially determine, it's that first stage of trying to determine interest. So the two reports or the two tools that I would use, particularly in analytics, to try and identify this for clients that I work with on a regular basis, are things like your user location report and the user language reports. So they can essentially be used to try and just understand and identify where there's a large volume of demand or traffic for your brand. I think particularly if you haven't actually done any advertising in international markets and you're starting to see traffic and sales trickle through from those, it's a really good starting place to know where maybe your brand or your products and services are starting to resonate. So we have that, and they can then also be used to identify things like markets that have high conversion rates despite a low amount of traffic. So that might signal an opportunity for high return on investment versus just really high sales. So it works very differently for different businesses based on your goals, but they're the two places I would initially start. I think firstly, if we see that the volume of traffic from international markets is high without brand presence or advertising, it's probably a good place to get the ball rolling and start to try and increase your presence across multiple channels, whether that be through a brick and mortar store, whether it be through affiliates or through Google or through social. It shows that there's an opportunity there because your products or services are being found through generic searches that are clearly resonating with locals. So if you take that knowledge, pair it with the likes of Google Trends, or if you work with a digital agency, discuss it with them to see how they can help you understand the wider potential in the market. And again, like I said, if there's areas where conversion rates are high, have a look at what your goals are. Maybe you want to go after high return on investment with not a huge amount of new customers or new revenue, based on if you don't have as much money to invest initially. They're probably the golden nuggets that you want to go after in terms of markets.
So those are kind of not quick and easy, but those are relatively accessible data points that most businesses who are online anyway will have Google Analytics. A lot of people will be doing search ads, or Google ads rather. So that's quite accessible data to most people. Going beyond that, and the question to Nicola, I guess, is what else can you do to have a look into those markets and assess the suitability and the opportunity in those target countries?
Yeah, just touching upon what Liam was saying, actually, it is important that when using particularly third-party tools that might give you an idea of the interest in your products or services, it might also, look at the competition as well within that market. These are really powerful tools and a great starting point, but I can't stress enough that it's important to gather your own raw data. What does this mean to my business? And sometimes that might involve testing, certain markets before actually investing a lot of money in localization of digital campaigns, website content. I'd also like to touch upon something. It's kind of like when we assess, a company or a business against, a market's expectation and user behavior. So, when we think about, entering new markets, let's say, we're constantly thinking, well, what is it that would allow me to succeed? And we need to make sure that we are, linguistically faithful to that market and that language. So that might be an indication of the resource and the budget that you will need. So is this a completely different language where we need a team to help us create and generate new, fresh content? Or is this a market that we can, target in the domestic language? In which case, that will massively affect your strategy moving forward. Another area to sort of consider as well is, the competition. So, what are those kind of standards and common themes that we're seeing in that market? Why are your competitors winning? And what would we need to change for your website? So the best way of sort of explaining it is a market entry kind of audit of your domestic site is a way of assessing how ready you are to sell in that other country. So making sure that, you understand things like the legal requirements, the sort of trust signals. It might be the customer service options, the payment methods that people would need to succeed in that market. Well, again, that's going to affect your resource, your budget, the time that's needed. And so, I think it's always a good idea to take the domestic site and sort of think, what do I need to change? What's mandatory, what's a nice to have, and what are we ready for right now? And that can be a really good way of assessing if you've got 3 markets that you're toying with the idea of which one's right for me. Well, doing a bit of a market readiness report is always a good idea, and it's something that we've done a lot for clients. And what we tend to find is it's that it all depends on that business. How ready are you to invest in this? So there'll be a common theme with my answers, but it always depends, doesn't it? Always depends.
Perfect. Thanks, Nicola. Another question maybe for Liam. Are there any other tools out there, either within Google or that you've seen in the market, that companies or agencies can get access to that'll give a bit more of a deeper understanding of market opportunity beyond Google Analytics, Google Ads, any of the kind of secret stuff that you guys have access to that would be useful?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, there's always, if any businesses are working with a Google account manager or with an agency who are a premier partner with Google, there's always going to be an additional bit there for them to be able to pull on, an additional resource and support that they can get. So that's obviously a massive advantage. But for those businesses who are maybe doing it on their own or at a relatively early stage, or maybe are don't have the speciality in-house, there's probably two tools that jump to mind that I'll touch on briefly. But the first is, and probably most importantly, is Google's Market Finder. So it's a completely free, externally available tool that essentially allows anyone to do one of three things, or do three things. So first, what it allows you to do is find the best markets for your businesses by showing you the monthly Google searches for your selected products or services. It indicates things like the GDP or the buying power per market. And then it also analyzes things like consumer behavior. So how do customers buy when they're in that market? What are their demographics? What channels do they tend to search on? That gives you a really, really strong starting point, maybe to build on top of that analytics and ads insight work that you've already done. So it's as simple as just putting your business's URL into the website. It will analyze it for you and it spits that out. Then secondly, it will help you to prepare the business operationally. So really speaking about what Nicola just touched on there in terms of making sure that you're maybe your website is culturally appropriate for a market that you're going into. So if you need support with logistics, with customer service, payments, there's loads of different guides that help you to understand what's needed for each market, maybe what you're missing out on in each of those as well. And then finally, it gives some marketing advice, but it would also then link you with specialist agencies who are able to support you in your marketing. So such as yourselves, Chris, Search Labs, obviously as an international growth agency partner with Google, are one of the few who are listed on that. And obviously then you have additional access to some of the tools that we would use ourselves internally. And that is a big, big help to a business who don't really know what they're doing, to help them make sense of some of that data, but then also execute against it as well. So a massive, massive help in that. And then just one other small tool within that I would touch on, which is a really, really exciting new tool, especially if you're a retailer. It's called My Export Score. So if you'd like a really quick analysis done of your website to understand and test your export readiness, essentially, or maybe why your conversion or your bounce rates are struggling, take a look at that. So if you just Google it, you should find it, no problem. It's My Export Score. But essentially it combines that data from your Google Ads and your Google Analytics that we already talked about alongside your website. And then essentially just creates this really clear, comprehensive report on weak areas across your site based on the market that you're going after. And then it just gives you recommendations on how to improve them. So two tools that I would really, really encourage anyone to take a look at if you're at that early to mid stage of international expansion.
Perfect. Thanks, Liam. I would just second what Liam says about, if you are running campaigns already on Google Ads, either, if that's on quite a large scale and you do have your own direct account manager at Google, or if you're working with an agency, they will have an agency support team working with them. And there is access via that team at Google. There's some really, really good market insights. But yeah, going beyond that, that growth partner program that we sit on has given us as an agency a lot more access to, I say, the secret stuff. I guess it's just a whole other range of more advanced data and tools that are a bit more a bit more exclusive and a bit more powerful, really, to help guide you in where to go. Any other factors to consider in which markets to go into? I think one point that Nicola made before was interesting that I wanted to pull up again was, thinking about, do you go for a market which speaks the same language as you, so that you're cutting down on localization or translation costs, or do you go for the market which is the most has the most opportunity for you based on the data and decide that you just have to do translation to get there? I mean, are there any things to consider in that process that would be interesting to mention?
Yeah, I think my answer is it depends. It would always depend on the individual business. Yeah, because I think localization it's not a complex process, but it's a project that never finishes. It needs to always be running in the background to make sure that you're constantly providing users and customers with the right type of information. I certainly wouldn't, if the opportunity in interest and revenue was pointing towards localizing your content, then my advice there would be to almost reduce a cost of translation, is to integrate some almost like digital insights into that process. So one example is that there's some technology that I'm sure everybody's aware of in translation projects, where it's called translation memory. And, essentially it's just a database of all of the translated terms that you've ever used on your site. And this is really effective and useful because it means that you can, any repetition of words or any terminology, you're then not paying for the translation of that repetition again and again. So it's a really cost-effective way of scaling up some website localization, or at least marketing like collateral. But what we've sort of experienced is when translation, memory is a standalone and it's not integrated with things like, looking at the search terms that people are using to find those products, the common questions and things like that from the users, then whenever you're continuing with that localization project, it's pulling out terms from the translation memory that aren't quite optimized. And it means that then you've got two separate teams who are working on those campaigns. So you've got your translators and then your digital team sort of optimizing them. And that would be my advice, is if localization is the way to go, then definitely find a process where you're making sure that you're injecting that sort of SEO visibility, the keyword research. You're really mapping those keywords to different pages and trying to understand, like, how would Google understand this website, just as much as a user would, and incorporating that into the localization or translation process is, it saves time, it saves money, and it means that all of those optimized terms can be used in the future. So it's just about longevity, really. It's don't see, a market where you need to localize as, right, we can't do that because, we're going to need more resource, we're going to need more time. It's just about making sure that the process is smooth, and that you have those teams integrated, that I would say, throughout.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. And I think, as much as localization of a website can be a huge undertaking, it is, again, dependent on the kind of company and the products that you sell. We do a lot of work in B2C, so we do a lot of work in retail in particular, but we also do a lot of work, in particular international work, with B2B companies. We work with a lot of technology companies where the process for expanding internationally for them is, yes, they have to translate a website. They may have to translate and localize the interface of their technology. They may need a native language speaking customer service team. But once they've done it once, that's it, and it doesn't really change. So the barrier to entry into those markets is maybe lower than an e-commerce company where they have tens or hundreds of thousands of products. Those products may change every 3 to 6 months. There's a huge undertaking of localization in that B2C world compared to B2B. But I think Nicola's point's right. If that is the market that you need to go for, if for whatever reason you can see from the data, you can see from your research, from your own business that for example, Germany is the market for you above all others, then absolutely go for it, but I think the message is kind of do it properly and don't just try to half bake it, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd probably just add as well that something that I get asked quite a lot is, what should I be doing? Should I be targeting a language or a country? And you know what my answer is? It massively depends. But yeah, you're right. What we tend to find within the B2B sector, particularly if you're selling a service, a product, a platform that doesn't really change, the experience of that doesn't change. The only thing that needs to is language. So, an example would be, Zoom or Microsoft Teams, something like that. It's a platform that is consistent. Then, of course, we would do all of that. We target a language. But when it comes to sort of, retail, e-commerce, that's when we have to consider, well, we're actually going to have a transaction on that site. What sort of trust signals? What does the user journey look like? And yeah, it's important to just make sure that we're satisfying the user's needs at all time throughout that localization process. But yeah, there's always sort of an argument of which one should I do, and it will always depend on your sector.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. One that quite often gets asked when we're speaking to clients or prospective clients is, they ask about testing the water. How can we just, maybe try a few things in a few markets to get a feel? Any thoughts on that? I guess that the first one I would say that quite often pops up is we have a lot of companies, because we do Google advertising management. We quite often have a lot of companies who will come and ask us to create, for example, a German version of their Google Ads campaigns. And then they'll say, well, do I need to translate my website? I've got the ads there. Do I need to translate my website? And I think either one of you can answer this one. But I mean, that is testing the water very, very, I guess, gingerly, if you like. What is that advice? Are there other things that you can do to really test the waters or have a soft launch into new markets?
I think, I can take a little bit definitely on the Google side of things, and in terms of the inefficiency of it when it comes to it. When we look at how Google ranks ads or how the auction actually works, it's all down to relevance of the ad as opposed to just the bid that you're putting in. So if you have a German ad that's redirecting to a UK or an English website, automatically the relevance is massively reduced. So you're going to really have to overpay in order to make sure that you're appearing to the right customers. And then once you do that, they're going to go onto your website having seen a German ad and realize that they actually can't navigate in German. And I think it's an interesting enough piece. A lot of people will say, okay, in Germany, there's a lot of English speakers. And it's true. I think 70% of Germans have a proficient level of English. So absolutely, they can understand it. But when we look at cultural nuances as well, first of all, 93% of all Google searches in Germany happen in German. Only about 4% happen through English. So really, really minimal. But then a second thing in terms of how Germans tend to react to communication online is that they like it to be quite direct. They like it to be straightforward. And as a result, if they're going onto a German ad and landing on an English website, it's not going to appeal to them. You're going to see really, really high bounce rates, really low conversion rates. And then it's also just going to have an impact on your brand for that person in the long term. So yes, it's a good way to maybe understand what that initial demand is in German language. But as an overall test, you're going to see your marketing performance come down as really, really weak as a result of the lack of conversions. So yes, can be a good way to maybe test demand. Terrible way to test whether your product resonates or not with the local language. Although I'm sure Nicola probably has much better ideas in terms of how to actually then do those soft launches and go for it.
Is this where we start to talk about the likes of Amazon on a panel with Google and see what happens?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because you know, the problem with, you know, running a paid campaign to test the waters as such is it will never give you the absolute result. It should only be sort of done if you're willing to almost build out a localized landing page as a minimum on a subfolder of that site. And even then, you've got to think, well, if it's B2C or retail, you know, I'm not going to be able to satisfy that user, even if I can give them a landing page in localized sort of language, then I'm not going to be able to answer any other questions or satisfy the payment methods or anything like that. So yes, it's probably something that we can, you know, that you can do to gain an idea. But I would say that sometimes, you know, testing the water as such is actually taking that initial first step to say, well, how can I stage my sort of project here? And so, you know, if the plan is that we need a brand new localized version of the website, don't go to translate or localize every single page on that site. Instead, really think, well, where am I getting the most demand in this market? And start with a microsite. You know, only focus on those key products or services. Make sure that you as well invest in, you know, the static pages that will really help drive the user through to whatever end goal it is that you're trying to achieve. So it's almost giving them the stepping blocks, whether that be, you know, the T's and C's localized, customer service localization, but it's just assisting the users to convert. Then, you know, once you've sort of launched that, you're able to sort of run it for a few weeks, a few months, and then are able to say, right, now that we've, you know, generated some revenue from stage one, we can release new budget that takes us into stage two. And so that would be my advice: is don't see, you know, that entering a market as being absolutely everything at once. It's just really thinking, how can I satisfy this market's need? Why am I the solution? And just go, you know, with that first, and yeah, let your performance and success really determine your next stage.
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself there. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I won't mention them by name again, but I mean, marketplaces in the, you know, in the retail space, you know, if you're not looking to localize your website, or if it's just not an option at the moment, then, you know, there are marketplaces out there that exist as, you know, they have existing customer bases, traffic, exposure, where, you know, you can list your products and sell on there and get a feel for if there is an appetite in that market. And then, you know, that then can give you the comfort or the confidence to then go and invest in localizing your website and starting to do your own advertising. And I mean, ultimately, we would advise in the longer term, you probably want to sell via your website so that you keep all of that rich customer data rather than passing it over to a marketplace. But that can be an option at the beginning if you don't have the appetite or you don't have the resources available to localize a website.
Yeah, that's it. I think you can really you know, drive some brand awareness through those sorts of platforms as well, and that's the first step of sort of identifying which are the products that are really working in this market. And I think just something else to mention is, you know, just a couple of platforms. Sorry, Liam, but you know, Amazon and the one in China, actually, Tmall. I hope I've pronounced that right. But they offer brands the opportunity as well to almost, you know, create brand pages where you can really go into detail about who you are and what your USPs are. You know, you're almost building a scrollable homepage, if you like. So, particularly for retail, this is definitely something that we do with our clients, and then we sort of build on that for localizing websites, if that's the way that we want to go.
Don't worry, you don't need to keep apologizing to me. I'm not that precious. I'm well aware that they're great platforms for it as well, and I would agree with you as well.
Perfect. It's very noble of you. Thanks, Liam.
I know. My halo, you can't see my halo on the screen. It's slightly out of camera shot.
Fantastic. So we've probably touched on a few of these already, but I was going to say, we've gone through the process there of identifying which markets to go into. As I say, we've probably covered a few of these already in that conversation, but when we start to think about the steps that businesses need to take to make sure that they're as successful as possible, and they're putting themselves in the best possible position to generate a positive return on investment, what do people need? What are the big bits of advice you can give, or what are the big things that people need to avoid doing based on the experience that you both have of doing this with multiple companies in multiple markets?
Well, I'm happy to jump in first on that. I think one of the big developments over the last couple of years from a Google perspective as well is realizing that there's a huge amount more that goes in outside of just the advertising piece. I think that obviously looks at the pre-purchase element of a customer journey. How do we look to impact that, and how do we get in front of the right people? But I touched on a little bit in terms of the Google ranking, and if you have the wrong language in the ad and then different one on the website, there's a huge amount now of focus that goes on the purchase element of the customer journey and the post-purchase. So there's kind of 4 key areas that we would look at as a company now, and where we look to give support as an international growth team. And it's looking at things like what are your customer service options, and what's the customer experience look like, all the way from the landing page experience right through to checkout. So that involves having the diverse delivery options, making sure that your logistics and your which covers everything from your returns and your delivery options, are set up properly for a specific market. Making sure that are you balancing cost with speed when it comes to free delivery versus next day delivery? We know that in the US they actually much prefer free delivery over the next day element. In the UK, next day has become really, really important on that side of things. So there's really, really big cultural differences there, and it can be difficult to access that level of information, that type of detail. But things to be really wary of. Other elements would look at things like payments. Have you localized your checkout experience? In Germany, for example, the likes of Afterpay and Klarna are becoming absolutely massive. There's a huge returns culture in Germany. So they'll see a lot of those things coming through, whereas the likes of Klarna and Afterpay are actually starting to offset that a little bit as well, because people are more willing to spend on the items that they really want, and not just buy multiple and return whichever one they choose not to use as well. So making sure that your payments are localized on that side as well. And then obviously the localization piece is absolutely massive, and probably it is the biggest challenge that we see businesses coming to us with, because they understand that it is probably the most important element to getting it right. And I think, and Nicola, you'll talk to this a little bit more than me, but not mixing up localization with translation is really, really important on that side of things as well. But they'd be some of the biggest hurdles that we would see. And obviously as Google, we're now trying to provide support and advice and consultants who can actually support on that side of things. And obviously that's a big one of those value adds or exclusive resources that's available to yourselves, Chris and Nicola as well. So really, really important elements there.
Yeah, and just to sort of answer when you were talking about what are the almost like the common sort of errors or mistakes that I've sort of experienced working with my clients over the past few years, and I would actually say that it's relying solely on automated translation tools. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm so sorry about that. I just dropped my phone. But if you'd have asked me about 5-6 years ago whether any of my team were using automation within translation or localization projects, the answer would have been no. The quality just wasn't there. Technology has improved massively, and it's something that can be used for digital sort of advertising solutions, but it should never be the only tool that you use. You should always make sure that you have sort of native speakers checking over that, because we see so many errors being made in, for example, just directly translating keyword lists for paid advertising. And it could be that, particularly in the technology and B2B sector, there are a lot of acronyms being used, and those acronyms have double meanings. In some markets they mean something completely different, and so that's where it's important to really understand the SERP landscape. How is Google interpreting this? So we had one a couple of weeks ago, actually, where we'd used an acronym that meant exactly what it was supposed to in the French language, but as soon as you put a location like a city in France next to it, it changes the meaning completely. So I would say one of the things is to never just solely rely on technology. When we see that, we spend a lot of time having to rectify the errors and the missed opportunities. And I'd also just say, when it comes to localization, it's much more than just the words that you see on a page. This is, making sure that we are culturally appropriate. Are we using the right sort of imagery in our advertising campaigns and on our website? Are we sort of understanding popular culture there as well, and key sales events? So, one thing that we've spoken quite a lot with our clients about over the past few years is, the growth of Black Friday. And of course, that is a huge sales event for a lot of countries, but it's also not applicable in a lot of other countries. And so, it's about making sure that we're fully immersed, if you like, into the culture, and we're just making sure that when we're localizing, we're thinking much more than the words.
I can just add to that one, actually. I mean, so we're a digital marketing company. That's what we do. We just happen to do that in lots of different languages. We do also do website translation, but I guess translation and localization is a skill. It's a amazing skill, and it's a huge market. And you have some fantastic companies out there that do great translation and localization. Digital marketing is a different skill. Just because somebody can take an English website and create a perfect German version of that website doesn't mean that it's digital marketing ready. So, I always kind of use the example, if you think about an English language website, if you go in, if you want to launch an English language website, then, you may have internal resource that can do that for you with content. You may go to a copywriting company who'll create fantastic English language content for your website. You're then going to have to go and speak to a digital marketing company to optimize the content, to make it ready for SEO, to make it ready for conversion. So there's two different skills involved there. And a big mistake that we quite often see is that people will go and think that they've invested enough because they've had their website translated, but then there's an afterthought, which is, oh yeah, now I need a digital marketing company because I've just got some words on a page. Now that it's not always bad, it's not always a million miles away, but I think I would say that there has to be an appreciation of two different sets of skills. Translation, localization is one skill. Digital marketing is another skill.
Absolutely. It's something, as you're talking as well, it's something within the international department that I manage. When I recruit, I'm looking for completely different skills, and we separate those teams, and and make sure that we marry them up through a process. But yeah, you're completely right.
Yeah. What else is there? And another one, I guess, that I'll jump in with an answer to this one, that a conversation I've had with a lot of people about budgets and expectations of performance. I think we very often have conversations with clients where we have to, I guess, manage their expectations of performance in a new market. You may be in your domestic market, you may be the leader in your market domestically. You may have built a brand over 10, 15, 20 years in that market. You'll have digital marketing campaigns running that will deliver, cost-effective traffic to your website that converts. And I'm sure you'll have a load of performance KPIs that show that you're spending your budget well and your traffic's converting. Just because you have that in your domestic market, that doesn't mean that you can expect that level of performance in a new market at the very beginning. You've probably, if you do have a big brand in your domestic market, chances are you've spent a lot of time, effort, and money growing that brand through advertising, through partnerships, sponsorship, whatever it may be, to the point where people are confident in buying from you. They recognize the brand, they trust you, they probably search for you. So don't go into a new market and expect that you're going to get the same return on your investment from day one. In particular, from something like Google advertising, or whether any advertising channel really, your performance in a new market, unless you already have brand awareness and exposure in a market, whether that's through wholesale distribution or partnerships or whatever. If you're going to launch a new website in a new market, you're not going to get the same return on investment initially that you would get in your domestic market. So go into it with your eyes open, be aware of the amount of investment that's needed to grow a brand, as well as localizing and and driving traffic to the website. That would be the start of it, and then I guess that would lead on to. I think with all of this, there needs to be, in my opinion, a mentality of if you're going to go into a new market, the strategy has to be a strategy to win in that market. You going into a market just to try it or just to compete, you're never going to get the return from that market that you should, because you'll be going up against local market companies who have years and years of experience, who have an existing customer base, who have perfectly localized websites, who have a product or a service offering which is uniquely tailored to that market. They'll have customer service, returns, everything in place to deliver a fantastic experience to a consumer in their language, and they're already there in that market. So, if you come in with an okay localized website and an okay customer experience and products which are okay for the market, you're not going to compete. You're going to waste your money doing it. So, what's the expression? Go hard or go home. Or, if you're going to do it, you need a strategy to win. I'm not saying you are going to dominate in the market. If you go into it, it's going to be hard. But if you set the target as going in to win and compete with local market competitors and beat them, then you'll compete. If you go in and think, oh, well, I'm just going to compete, chances are you won't. So that would be a big one that I've seen over the years. I don't know if there's anything to add to that one from Nicola or Liam.
Yeah, I think it is one, Chris, that you mentioned in terms of that expectation setting when you are going into it. I think one big mistake I always see is that brands go in with small budget in an area where they have no brand presence, and they just try to focus on capturing people who are searching for their brand, even though they don't have a store there. Like you said, they're not distributing through wholesalers. They haven't done any like social activity or anything like that either in order to build it up. And then they're wondering why there isn't that much traffic or that much demand coming through, and then they see that, okay, this market's not good for me, and they switch off really early as well. So that's actually more of a wasted money than maybe putting aside a little bit more, spending a little bit more time trying to understand the market.
In that scenario, actually, it's not that the market isn't right for them. It's that their advertising campaign and their approach isn't right for the market.
Exactly. And I think it goes back to the points that Nicola made initially in terms of what's the reason that you are going into a new market or looking to expand further? Are you looking to win more customers? Are you looking to drive additional revenue? If that's the case, start from there and then start to work backwards in terms of trying to understand what that strategy is and what your value proposition is going to be in a new market. Otherwise it's going to be a long road to try and actually get the success that you need there.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just conscious of time coming up to the end of the scheduled hour for the panel discussion. Any key points any key questions that I haven't asked that I should have asked, or any points that you think we may have missed that we should get over in the last few minutes of the panel? Or key takeaways, if you want to put it that way. What would be the main things for people to take away?
I think I can jump in with a couple of key takeaways. I suppose the three that I would take from this is that now is a really good time to internationalize. International trade's growing faster than domestic. It's easier than ever to sell cross-border, and people are more willing than ever to actually purchase from international sellers. And if you're doing that, the second point is to just really ensure that you do have a brand presence where there is demand for your products and for your services. If you're already selling to places where you have no presence, it's a good time to start looking at how you can increase your brand there or capitalize on that brand piece that we just touched on. And then we talk about, obviously, about people being more willing to purchase from abroad, but it's still really, really important to come across as a local business. There is a big focus on supporting local at the moment as a result of COVID, but what we really need to think about is how do we reduce that perceived distance between you as the business and the consumer. And I think that we do that by supporting our media or our advertising with both localized content, but localized operations that really creates a localized, compelling value proposition as to why those consumers should look to actually purchase from you or to use your service. So they're the three main things from my end that I would take away from this.
Thanks, Liam.
Yeah, I would just add everything that Liam said, I agree with. I think the point of it's really important that whenever you're scaling up your business, that you do think about that resource pool, who can help you there. And please don't rely solely on technology to do that. I would say that, in summary, something that we're constantly pushing for sort of global success is, make sure that, like I said, linguistically, this is spot on for users. So like I said, the technology that you use in the resource teams, but then just this whole point about, just the cultural compliance, just if you're not willing to fully localize, not just language, but fully satisfy the user needs and expectations, then you're only ever going to get a really small bite of that pie. And we want the whole thing. And I'm going to finish there.
I think that's a really good way to finish. We want the whole pie, don't we, Nicola? That's the main takeaway. Well, that's fantastic. I'll wrap it up there as far as the panel discussion is concerned. I know we've had a few questions come through that I think have been answered in the chat. Liam has kindly shared the URLs to some of those tools that Google have for going and assessing the suitability of different markets. So that's great. Thanks for that, Liam. Is there anything else? We have a question come in. There's a question come in specifically around, I guess it's more of a translation and localization industry question. I'm not going to dodge it because I don't want to answer. We aren't necessarily a specialist translation company, and we're not translation specialists. We are digital marketing specialists who happen to do digital marketing translation and website translation, but we do it as part of digital marketing campaigns. So very good question, but I don't think we're the right people to give you any kind of credible answer on that one, unfortunately. If there are any other questions, though, I'm sure somebody can answer that one for you. I'm sure in the chat, or the guys from Multilingual can come back to you on that question. Any other questions about what we've been through today, or global expansion online generally, that we can help you out with? Well, otherwise, if there's not, that's been really, really good. I'd like to thank Nicola and Liam for their time. That's been really, really useful, very insightful. Some great takeaways there for companies off the back of this. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. I hope you all found that very useful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you do have any questions that you haven't thought of just yet. And we'll obviously help you. And yeah, thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, or the end of the day, depending on where you are. And I think we'll say bye from there. So bye, everybody.
There you go again, looking so handsome. Oh, you have your way, and it's making me weaken. You and your stardust, walking like that. It's really getting too much, but I can't pull back. Though I try to resist, I can't fight this. And no one makes me feel like you do. And no one sets my body on fire. And no one gives me shivers like you. Oh, no one does it better. How I try to sleep, but you're deep in my mind. Got a hold of me. When I'm awake, I'm all blind. You and your magic, like infinite power. God knows I try to resist, but you're pulling me closer. Oh, I gotta stay away, but you won't let me.